So before we get started, I kind of want to get a read of the room about how you're feeling right now as you start to look toward life after Clark. So Donna's going to pull up a poll for you, and we're going to give you a few seconds to think about whether you feel totally freaked out, a little anxious, or you feel like you've got it handled.
So 31% are totally freaked out, 62% a little anxious, and 1% I've got this.
Okay, not surprising. And I think, you're not alone, really. If you're feeling this way, that it's not really all that surprising. I found this illustration online and it really resonated with me. I don't know if you can read the middle option, but it made me laugh. It says, become an anarcho-primitivist and eat bark. And while I'm not going to discount that entirely, as I am addressing some Clarkies, I'm guessing most of you are looking at the other two. So, getting a job or applying to graduate school. But once you start thinking of either option, I'm sure you're starting to, your brain's starting to process, well, what is that going to mean? Am I going to get a job that I like? Is it going to pay enough to pay the rent? Am I going to have to live at home with my parents? If I go to graduate school, boy, I'm taking on maybe some more debt. And then when I get out, am I in the same position where I have to find a job? And is it a job that is going to help me pay the rent? Lots of worries, I know. And I too graduated at a time when things weren't so great economically. And there were a few jobs for new graduates. And I did have some debt to pay off. I know, this generation has a, higher hurdle with a lot of that. But, I can understand where you're coming from right now. So what I'm going to try to do today is really talk a little bit about, how you can use some of the skills and tools that you've learned at Clark to kind of jumpstart you through, the process and hopefully ease a little of your anxiety along the way. So let's take another poll. And I would like to, I think there's, a subconscious limitation right now that, people put on themselves, that you should get a job in a field related to your major. So let's put that to the test, and just see, what the Federal Reserve Bank of New York learned in a 2019 study of what percentage of college graduates actually work in a field related to their major. Okay, so now I'm seeing the results. Great. Wow, you guys must have read this study. Because 27% is correct. 50% of you got that right. And, if you think about it, admittedly, like 63% who pursue a job outside of their degree field are doing so out of necessity, right? But I'm here to tell you that looking outside of the box that is your degree can open you up to tremendous opportunity. So again, your degree is not a box. And I tried to feature some, famous Clarkies and, share with you their Clark degree and what they're doing today. So if you look over to the right here, we've got Padma Lakshmi, has a degree from Clark in theater arts. She's today a very famous author and activist. She's a model. She's a television host. Very, very successful. Ron Shaikh, 76, shares a degree in geography with me. And he's the founder of two companies. He started out with Oblong Pan and moved on to Panera Bread. So very, very famous Clarkie. And then somebody I, was at school with for at least a year, Matt Goldman, who graduated with a degree in economics and is now was the founder of Blue Man Group, another very successful endeavor, and totally different from what he graduated in. And just a funny story, when I was putting together this presentation, I originally had all their pictures in boxes, and I went back and I looked and I said, oh, I'm telling them that your degree is not a box, and I put all these people in boxes. So just a funny side note about, about that. So yeah, don't think about your degree as something that you can flex into, but not constraining. It is just the beginning. All right, so now I'm going to just talk a little bit about my own journey from geography to communications. I'm not as wildly successful as the three Clarkies on the previous slide, but I am doing all right. And, just to take you kind of back to where I was in '86, I was graduating with a degree in urban geography. And I looked for jobs in the field, and I quickly discovered that even with a master's degree, the jobs were hard to find and they didn't pay well at all. So I felt a little frozen. I wasn't sure I wanted to invest in a master's degree if it wasn't going to help me with career success. So I decided to take a pause and see how the world of work was going to work out for me. And the only job that I could find at the time was as an administrative assistant. It was for a startup company in Maynard, Massachusetts, and it specialized in information security. And when I got there, I discovered that my knowledge of actually PCs and my ability to write actually gave me opportunities to help them digitize operating manuals, marketing communications, and training materials. Just for context, in '86, when I graduated, PCs were very new on the scene. Our first computer PC lab in the at Clark. So you had to actually go to the Jonas Clark Hall and go upstairs to a room where they had a few of these rainbow PCs with dual floppy disks. And these were the original floppy disks that were actually floppy, and you had the program on one and you had your files on the other. And I took it upon myself to kind of learn that technology. And again, it did really help me out in the coming years. So after, so I was at this little firm for a bit of time. And then I moved to the Chicago area, and that was in 1990. And the only opportunity I could find was as a contractor doing editing work for Motorola University. And again, I realized that my knowledge of computers, graphic design, and writing gave me a significant advantage over other contractors. So with that knowledge, I moved from being just an independent contractor to the owner of actually a full-fledged marketing, training, and communications firm with 10 people. And we served big clients across the Chicago area, such as Motorola, as I mentioned before, McDonald's, Kraft Foods, and Allstate. And so I started that in 1990. And then, in the early aughts, there was a mini recession after 9/11, and it kind of hit my business. So I had to make a decision about what I wanted to do at that point, whether I wanted to reinvest in that or do something else. And my kids at that point were in middle school. So I decided to close shop. And I went to work for one of my biggest clients, Motorola, as a director of employee communications. And I was there for another 5 years. I moved to the Caremark division of CVS in 2008. So Caremark is a pharmacy benefit manager, and it's part of the bigger CVS company. And I went there as head of communications, and then 5 years later, I was transferred from Chicago back to New England to take on leadership of an enterprise internal communications team. And then in 2019, they bumped me to a new role leading a group that handles, as Donna covered before, media relations, executive communications, and then internal communications for CVS Pharmacy. And I have to say, it's been quite a year to move into this new role, given the pandemic and CVS's role as an essential service provider, and as well as one of the leading providers in the country of testing services and now vaccinations for COVID-19. All right. In my journey, when I look back on it, my journey from geography to communications felt somewhat accidental. I didn't have a plan. It just kind of happened. I fell into where my natural skills happened to be. But I also, when I looked back on it and I'm preparing for this presentation to you, I realized that I actually learned a lot of other things along the way that I thought might be beneficial for all of you. So let's just take these one at a time. I think, the first one was to let your interests evolve. So your degree obviously is an area of interest, right? But you're all still pretty young and there's so much out there to learn about and discover. And you may also find that going deeper in an area of interest leads to career possibilities that you never would have considered. Think about Ron Shaikh and Padma Lakshmi here. They didn't go to school for baking or cooking, but they've made careers out of that interest area. As you go along, you may stumble upon, if you keep your mind open, you may stumble upon a new area of interest altogether that you never considered or even knew existed. The second thing is know what you're good at, and don't discount things that you do for fun. So if you think about Matt Goldman and his career path, he had a degree in economics, but he made a career out of his natural skills in play and theatrics with Blue Man Group. Number 3 is project confidence. If you're skilled and knowledgeable about something, don't be intimidated about offering an opinion or an insight to a group of older people. I sometimes see that with younger colleagues. And even more important, don't ever apologize for offering an opinion, even if you discover that it wasn't maybe as insightful as you initially thought it was. Confidence is a really important tool in your box as you go out and you either pursue an advanced degree or you're in the workforce. Number 4, if you're going into the workforce, is a really important one. Jump in and do what others won't. In organizations, sometimes there's a really obvious problem that needs to be fixed, but it feels too hard, for others, or they don't have the time or the skill, or they feel like it's not their job. And for people who are new to the workforce, this is always a great opportunity to step up and take it on, even if it's not, in your job description. And then afterwards, that's actually a card to put in your pocket for later negotiation when you're asking for a raise or you are trying to move to a new role, either within that same organization or, somewhere else. And then finally, being okay with making mistakes. That was something I learned as well. If you don't try the new and the different, you won't make mistakes. But you also might find that it's harder to move ahead to where you want to be. And I think, that some of these things with pursuing a liberal arts degree, you do get a chance to practice some of this in the classroom with your instructors. I think Clark encourages, all of its students and its alumni to, constantly evolve your interests. Lifelong learning is such an important thing. And I hope that you've learned, a degree of confidence in your time at Clark that you can carry on to, whatever is next for you. But again, this is all stuff that is, I found very effective in my early stages of my career. And regardless of what you do, I think that there are certain competencies that predict success, whether it's in a job or while you're pursuing an advanced degree. So here's where your Clark experience, again, can be a real advantage. Because when I look back at my own time at Clark, I realized I started acquiring some of these competencies during my time as a student. And I've broken these into a couple of groups. The first, I labeled table stakes. They're the basics. They're the competencies that I would expect to see in any graduate student or a work colleague. And then underneath are some advanced competencies that I think can really propel you to great things in your career and your life. And while I think that these are pretty explanatory, I do want to talk in more depth about a couple of them. First, let's just chat a little bit about resilience and adaptability, because let's face it, the world is changing at an incredibly rapid pace, and people who are resilient and adapt well to change do better. And I'll just talk a little bit about, what's been going on at CVS and what we've been faced with, and how, we as a group of employees have had to step up and be resilient and adaptable. Obviously the past year has tested all of us. And when the pandemic hit, we had about 10,000 stores of really frightened customers and employees. And at first, we couldn't get our hands on enough masks or plexiglass shields to protect people at the register. No one wanted to touch the PIN pad to pay for their things. Everybody was afraid. They didn't want to sign for things at the drive-through. And we didn't have like a great delivery model, right, for people who wanted their prescriptions sent to their home. The media was pounding on us daily with questions about how we were going to handle all of this. And it ended up that, we had years of change basically jammed into a couple of frenetic months. So some of the work that we did, had been projected to be done at some point in the future, and all got just compressed, right, into a couple of short months. And people, stepped up. People had to be really resilient and say, okay, I thought I was working on this, and now I'm going to work on this. And I may have to put in more hours than I, would normally have to put in to, help find solutions, look for new vendors for things, adapt processes and procedures, reprogram those, PIN pads at the register and at the drive-through, set up a new delivery model with new partners. There was just so much work that had to be done. And you just can't get that kind of work without a team of really incredibly resilient and adaptable people. So I see that as a really important and competency. And I think that spans any field that you go into today, or even if you go into graduate school, you do have to demonstrate that you're good at that. The next three all kind of relate to how well you interact with others. And again, as a graduate student or in your early work career, you will have to lean heavily on an ability to influence others, as you may not yet have direct control over decisions. But even as you gain authority and experience, you will still need to be able to know who can help you get what you need and what will motivate them to do so. So maturity and ability to empathize with others and to think about how what's at hand plays into society at large are key tools that you can use to influence others' thinking and to understand where they're coming from. Plus, it's just more pleasant to interact with someone with those competencies. You'll just do better in whatever situation that you find yourself in. So now let's, kind of just move on to our more advanced competencies. All three really relate to big thinking and taking bold steps. And these are critical skills in a world with such enormous challenges and opportunities. People change the world every day, by shining a new light on a problem, making a bold decision, or discovering something new that most of us would never have imagined, right? And maybe you've had a taste of that at Clark as you work with some of the amazing faculty there. To give you another example from CVS, we actually made in 2014, our CEO made a bold decision to remove tobacco from all the shelves of our stores. I don't know if you remember hearing about that or reading about it. It made a huge splash in the news. It was not just because it was a bold move, but also, because it's a publicly traded company and there was a $2 billion with a B billion dollar loss in revenue for the company that was associated with it. So, not an easy decision to make. It was risky, but it was one that was driven by a strong sense of purpose. That, we were, as a company, we were a team of people who delivered healthcare services to the community. And it was something that, we had always done because of the pharmacy in the back of the store, but we were doing more of with, Minute Clinic, which is like a retail clinic that you can go in and get seen for minor ailments and illnesses. And then also, now we're expanding even more into, kind of healthcare. So keeping tobacco on the shelves was really antithetical to that purpose. It was an absolutely huge risk for the company. But once it was made, it gave us an enormous reputational boost and made it easier for, the health plans that we were working with to feel good about sending their plan members our way. And in the end, I think because of that, because we stood on our principle, we aligned our business to our purpose. We ended up making that projected loss in other ways. Here was like a really big idea, a bold idea with a big risk, and it ended up having huge payoffs. So you can see there how, those kinds of competencies can really, obviously not everybody's going to be in a position to be CEO of a, Fortune 10 company, but, you can do some of those things, at any level of your career.
Mary, there's a question in the chat. Do you mind if I ask now? Because it's related to the competencies. And it's from Kelsey. And Kelsey, if I'm not framing it the right way, please chime in if you feel comfortable doing so. There's competencies and there's experience. And so Kelsey's question is about lacking hands-on experience in an area that she wants to pursue. And how do you, might you have some ideas or thoughts on pursuing a job or an area where your major is broad and your portfolio is small? Those are her words. So it's kind of that framing of knowing what your competencies are and what that could be lead to hands-on experience. But I'll let you answer.
Yeah, I think, I'm going to use the classic mailroom sort of example. I think the smart thing to do is to, understand, where your interests lie, right? And know where your skills are. And then just try to find opportunity, even if it is, again, in the mailroom. That's kind of the classic example. but find an organization that you see matches for your interests and your skills, and just try to get your foot in the door. And yeah, you won't be making, the grand salary, right off the bat, but you're exposing yourself in some ways to further your understanding of that interest area and of that industry or whatever it happens to be. And then by taking some risk, maybe taking on work again that, nobody else wants to do. That is a way to show that you are the type of person who, they want to keep, that, you're willing to invest the time to learn, to help them solve a problem. I think it is a little bit of a gamble. You don't know how it's going to go, but I think if you try those things, you're more likely to, find success in the long term. I've seen it actually shown as a Venn diagram, where they overlap, they have interests in one circle, skills in another, and opportunity in the third. And, that center point is really where, where your sweet spot is. So, you kind of have to find that opportunity to match those other two things. I hope that makes sense. Kelsey, if you have a follow-up question, I'd be happy to take it.
Thank you. No, that does help. I find that I find things that I've done, and I try to assess what skills came out of the little things that I've done, and I tend to try to amplify those in an interview. But when you don't have,
Experience,
a website, or if you don't have, any kind of work from other people, I guess you can make work for yourself, and try to fill those things. But I find that when they ask me about my experience, it feels a lot like lying right now, because there's not too much to show for myself.
Yeah. Another way to, I hear what you're saying. Another way to try to gain experience that feels more credible in an interview is through volunteerism. If you can find an opportunity to, kind of build on the skills and the interest area that you want to pursue through a volunteer opportunity, it is a really great way to, kind of move yourself forward and gain credibility. Also, don't discount anything that you've done at Clark. I don't know where your skills and interests lie, so I can't tell you if that's a, good match for you, but, sometimes it is, whether you've worked with a professor on, a study that the professor has done, really look for, where all those experiences, help you in what you're trying to pursue.
Thank you. I'd like to get into set design. So that's kind of not something that Clark has specifically. So that's also where some of my worry comes from, but this already helps a little. So thank you.
Okay. Again, like I just shared with Kelsey, that, you can try these, competencies on, by working on a thesis for grad school, or, again, helping an organization kind of get out of a log jam, whether it's a volunteer opportunity or an actual, organization of some kind. Just trying to get people to, I think as young people, you come at this with a unique perspective sometimes that, maybe they're missing. And I'm going to kind of build on the conversation I just had about experience and opportunities, by making that point, because sometimes I've seen people, do a lot of homework on an organization or a company that you want to, be involved with, and look for, things that maybe you see as opportunities for them to improve, right? That, and come to the interview with that. Go to the interview with that. Say, I've been, attending, I'm assuming it's set design for theater or something, right? I have done, some homework on your organization, and I love what you're doing here and here and here. Have you thought about this? Helping organizations think differently sometimes is a way to kind of get noticed. And again, it's something that you have to your advantage, being, a younger member of society with a different perspective. Another one that I really want to focus on, another competency here, is remaining curious. It is so, so important to making big decisions. And I think it's something that you learn a lot at Clark and, liberal arts education, that critical thinking. And I think some of the most successful people I know, they always start from curiosity. They never, kind of assume that they know the answers or dismiss someone out of hand. They were always asking questions of themselves and of others. And as a result of that, they learn new things. They're always learning new things. And they often have a truly, kind of entrepreneurial spirit for creating the new and the different. And, when you're not curious, you shut your mind off to new ideas and perspectives, and that can come at a great cost. Actually, I can share a little story, kind of a shocking little story from my time at Motorola. So it was kind of legend there. And this was just at the beginning days of the rollout of Apple as a phone, maker. Motorola had been like the big brand before that. And the story that everybody knew was that at some point in probably the late 80s or early 90s, there was an engineer at Motorola who proposed putting a camera in a phone. And that person's management team shut him down completely. Their mind was closed. They weren't curious. They shut it down, and it didn't go anywhere. And as a result, other companies leapt ahead of Motorola in putting a camera in a phone. So, that's a big example again of how a competency can actually, if you don't practice it well, it can come back and bite you. But I think even at this stage in your lives, having that curiosity, again, it kind of maybe helps you a little bit too, because you can maybe prompt people to kind of get to that headspace and think about their own organization and maybe the opportunities that they're not seeing. So again, a really, really important, important competency. So, I think you've listened to me long enough. I definitely want to flip it back over to you. And, I want you to think about a little bit, maybe take a few minutes and think about, what really interests you. What are you uniquely good at? What competencies that I talked about that maybe you think you need to work on, and how can you, best use your remaining time at Clark? So I'm going to let you guys think, ruminate on that for a few minutes, and then maybe we'll come back and we'll, have a little conversation about how, some of you felt, answering those questions, and then we can, just go to open Q&A and find out what else is on your mind. So cue the Jeopardy music.
Yeah. So these are prompts for the students, and that this is a safe place to ask questions that you feel like you're not getting answers for, or maybe there's not an answer, but you need some guidance. So don't hesitate to ask the question you've always been afraid to ask. And while you're thinking, I thought it might be helpful to get Mary's perspective on how might students talk about COVID and what they've had to, if they didn't get work because of COVID, but they've done something else, how would they frame that? Is that worth framing? Do you suggest they do that?
That's an interesting question. I think that it is obviously everybody understands the constraints that, the pandemic has put on society at large and on the economy and on job availability. I think that, if you can show, I know what I would look for. I would look for, that the person is doing something, even if it's, a volunteer, opportunity, that you're staying active. You're finding ways to, improve yourself, in some way, and to advance, your skills. I would look for that. So I think that, when you talk to a prospective employer, coming, with, that kind of story is always better than, I've been sitting on a couch in my mom's basement. So that's what I would counsel. And I think, you'd find a ready ear from, prospective employers who, really do understand that this is a unique time in our society.
The other question in the chat, I'm happy to.
I do. Yeah, I'm looking at this. So again, while people are kind of thinking about these other questions. So the question again from Kelsey is, I'm often asked if I can run an organization's Instagram and other socials because I'm young, but you don't enjoy doing it. How do you slip out of this Gen Z typecasting while still being adaptable in these technological times? Oh, that's very interesting. I can see how that would be really annoying. I think if doing that gives you an opportunity to get into an organization that you eventually maybe want to spend some time at, it's not necessarily a bad thing to, jump in and do a few things for them. But at some point, it's perfectly reasonable for you to, set somebody aside and say, what else can I do here? And this is really not, where I want to spend my time. Here is what I'm also good at. This is where, my true skills really lie. Again, kind of understanding where your skills are. And then if you can, match that up with something that you've seen while you've been at that organization, you say, well, this is what I'm good at. And oh, by the way, did you know that, such and such is going on, and I could help you fix that. That is always, always a good approach. And if you know somebody who is good at that stuff, say, hey, I can help you find someone else to do this work. I wouldn't say it until you know for sure you can move into this other, opportunity that may be there. But trying to help them solve the problem of needing somebody to kind of work on the social media piece while making a play for what you really want to do. Because you don't want to create a problem for them. They feel like they've got their problem solved by having you, do this kind of stuff. And if you just say, well, I just don't want to do it, and I want to do this other thing, and you don't help them solve that other, the vacuum that you'll leave by stepping away, you'll be less successful at making the move.
Thank you. So you suggest taking the jobs that do put you in these positions, even if it's not what you'd like to do?
Yeah, I mean, again, I took a job as an administrative assistant for an information security company, at the start of my career. Not what I wanted to do, not the, interest area that I really had in mind, but I knew that they, did some training and they did some marketing and communications. And I thought, well, maybe if I get my foot in the door here, I can, kind of move over. And it's what I did. I did that work for probably about a year. And when, I made a case. I made a case for moving, having them create a role for me that was more aligned with my skills and, help them, post a job for my replacement administrative assistant and all of that. So, yeah, I mean, it's the unfortunate thing, when you come out of school and jobs are scarce, you do sometimes end up having to do things that you just don't want to do. So everybody's had a few minutes to kind of think about this. I'd love to hear, from some of the others in this, in this event about, kind of how you felt answering these questions. Was this helpful to kind of think about your next steps in this way? Whatever you want to share is welcome here. I'd love to hear it.
Okay, I guess I can go. Thanks for your time tonight, Mary. And these questions have been very helpful in sort of organizing like what I've done academically into a more like interview job oriented spin. So like I'm similarly like Kelsey, a media culture and the arts major, and I've those questions sort of prompted me to think about what I focused on in larger term projects or my capstone projects, and like for me that would be like how consumers react or interact with the media they're seeing or the products that they're consuming. And I feel like I'm going on to participate in the 5th year MBA program, and for what I need to work on, I think from a media perspective, like I'm pretty literate in how maybe psychologically people connect with media and advertising or whatever it may be. But I think what I'm looking forward to learning more about is sort of the number side, how to
The analytics.
map out that the analytics and the statistics and the data behind that as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm glad that it helped you kind of frame that. And yeah, I think that's a great example of where, kind of you have a clear interest area that's actually informed by your area of study at Clark. And you've identified where, potentially you need to build some skill to go along with it. And then once you have that, just getting the right opportunity I can tell you data analytics is a great, it's a great area to be in, if you, get some skill in that discipline, because every company is looking at the numbers and they want to understand, consumer perceptions and of whatever. It really helps them make decisions.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think Ben kind of hit it on the head, and I just want to thank you for your time. It's always nice to see another Chicagoan and geographer kind of in the world. And so I'm a geography major, and I've been kind of like ruminating about the idea of packaging my geographic skills for the private sector and what that looks like. And so this kind of presentation kind of reinforced all those ideas that like I had kind of been getting at, but I didn't quite understand, because if you want to be in the private sector in geography, you have to be interdisciplinary, and you have to be a critical thinker, and you have to be able to be flexible and adaptable in order for those skill sets to really shine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I don't really have much of a question, but just in the sense that how would you, I guess to kind of further what we've been talking about, how would you package those more general like liberal arts, especially with Clark and its research background? How would you package Clark in this very unique research intensive liberal arts fashion for like the workforce, I guess.
Yeah. And are you talking about like in an interview, or package it for like a resume? How are you?
I think maybe both. I mean, so for example, like in an interview, you know, a lot of people, granted, I haven't been through a lot of interviews yet, but a lot of people don't quite understand the value of like deep-seated you know, deep-seated conversations that you get to have in a liberal arts environment, and the value that that can add to you as an employee.
Yeah, and speaking of geography, being out in the Chicago area, if that's where you're, you know, planning to stay, nobody has ever heard of Clark out there. So that presents a challenge in and of itself. So you have to kind of start from scratch. Whereas if you're, you know, out on the East Coast, you know, there is some awareness of, you know, Clark's culture, and, you know, that it produces kind of deep thinkers. But I think, you know, obviously, if you are trying to package that Clark story up for, you know, a potential employer, you know, lean into, you know, those unique experiences that you've had. Use that almost as lines on your resume. You know, if you actually, you know, worked with a professor on, you know, a study, for example, or helped contribute to some, you know, paper. If you did a paper yourself, because I mean, I actually did a thesis as a senior, and most of the people that I graduated with and went to other schools didn't do anything like that, anything that deep in terms of research. So, you know, I would definitely try to tell that story. I would, you know, look at how Clark packages itself, you know, use the website and the information that's there, and make sure that you are ready to kind of speak to Clark's unique strengths in producing thinkers, and their, you know, their deep investment in it, you know, in its students, you know, they're giving them real experience in research and thinking. I hope that helps. And I'd love to talk to you later. My son actually didn't graduate from Clark, but he's kind of in a geography role in the private sector. So
I would love
to talk to you offline, and I can share some insights there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary.
Oh, you're welcome. Anyone else? I know we have about 5 minutes left, and then I think I turn into a pumpkin because I've got to go to the the networking event.
I have a brief question just concerning the applicability of the competencies to sort of myself as an individual who finds what really engages me is I need to be challenged in a lot of ways. That's the only way I can really be successful, is if I'm challenged, or if that's challenging myself, or be presented with a challenge. And one way I've been kind of framed to me as life after Clark has been that people don't necessarily stick at the same job a lot anymore, especially if they're looking to be challenged, and they kind of make lateral jumps to move up. And I've had that advice given to me plenty of times. And I'm wondering to what degree you think that is accurate. And especially in the kind of a communications world, especially.
Well, first of all, I think it's great that you recognize that you need to be challenged. That is so important. That self-awareness is really good. And I would say that, yes, you know, there is, you know, a degree of benefit from, you know, moving from one opportunity to another, but only if you feel like you have, you know, don't do it just for the sake of doing it, you know, do it because you feel like, wow, I have, you know, achieved this, you know, sort of, I've gained this experience and set of opportunities. And I can see how now that is a base for something else. You don't want to move into the something else until you feel like, you know, you've got that base. You also you don't want to do too many of those, because I know when I look at resumes, and I see that somebody's been like a year here, a year here, a year here, I get a little nervous, honestly, that I'm going to hire this person and then they're just going to be gone, especially in a communication space. So, depending on, where you want to be in communications, it is different, but I know in corporate world, communications departments are not big. So, CVS has about 300,000 employees, and our communications department is 120 people. I know that probably sounds big, but in the scheme of things, if you look at like other groups in the company, like our IT organization is like 15,000 people. So communications is tiny compared to, IT or HR or other things. So there is not a ton of opportunity in the communications field as a whole in the corporate world. So when you get there, when you get in a role like that, you kind of have to be careful not to lose that. It may be hard to get back in, I guess, is what I'm saying. It's something to kind of hold on to. And I don't know if you're going to go into the networking session where we talk about communications at all, but we can, definitely talk about that a little further there too. Was that helpful?
So I think we'll wrap this up if that's all right. Mary, this has been really, really helpful. And I like the way Ben said it. I think it was very helpful in organizing, right? That all the things that are out there and putting some structure to them. So thank you very much for your time tonight. And students, I put in the link in the chat box for those who are registered for the networking event. There is a different link that you need to click on to join, which starts at 7:15. So go get refreshed. And Mary is in the Arts and Communication breakout room. We did do pre-assignment. We're trying to keep everyone in the rooms that they signed up for, but we'll see what we can do once we're in the session itself. So a big thank you to Mary and for the students coming out tonight.
Yeah, you're welcome. And if you are interested in staying in touch with me, just hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm always accepting, invitations from Clarkies. Would love to hear from you further.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Bye-bye.